We're about a month away from spring training, and the Atlanta Braves have not made any significant moves. While Alex Anthopoulos tells us there's money to spend and there are plenty of options left available, at what point do you start to get concerned about the direction of this team? I'll answer that question and many more on today's episode of Locked On Braves, so let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below. It does help out the show a ton whenever you do those things. If you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you as always, making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. And as I said in the cold open there, we are about a month away from spring training. It won't be too much longer now, and we'll actually be able to talk about stuff happening on the field, because hasn't been much to talk about off the field this offseason. But you still send in plenty of great questions. Got 20 questions that I'll answer on today's episode. A wide range of questions as usual. A lot of them talking about some free agent options that are left, some trade options. What route will the Braves go? What did the Braves do? Nothing. How concerned are you? All kinds of questions, including one. It'll be my least favorite question I will ever answer on this podcast. So make sure that you listen for that. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Well, with that, let's jump into the questions, because as usual, got a lot to answer, and I hate to have to crunch some of these in at the end like I always do. I'm going to start with this one that I headlined the episode with. This question comes from Atlanta Sports Central. At what point will you be concerned with the direction of this team? And I think it's an interesting question because I feel like a lot of Braves fans are feeling that this offseason because nothing has been done. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that those feelings aren't warranted. I don't agree with them. As I talked about on yesterday's podcast, I think this franchise and this team is still in a really good shape and in a really good direction over the next 4 or 5 years. But I understand the angst because nothing has happened to the point this offseason. You're coming off a very frustrating year in 2024. Even though they made the postseason, it was, a quiet 2 and out. It was just a hard season to watch. Look, we've talked about it a lot. It's an 89-win team that made the postseason, but I didn't have a lot of fun watching that team last year for the majority of it. It was a rough watch a lot of times. But to answer the question, at what point will I be concerned with the direction of this team? It won't be this offseason. I have maintained from the beginning of this offseason that the Braves could do nothing and go into next year as a World Series contender. And I still believe that. I don't agree with that. And I think the Braves do need to make some moves, and they do need to try to improve the quality of depth on this team to give them a better chance. But there is no point in this offseason that I would ever be concerned with the direction of this team. I don't know that there would ever be a point this year that I would be concerned with the direction of this team. However, I will say at the earliest that I would ever start to be concerned would be at the All-Star break of this year. And here's what that would look like. If we go into this season and the offense looks like it did last year, if the guys are healthy and, Olsen is more of a 30 home run guy than a 40 home run guy, if Ozuna were starting to regress a little bit, which, he's really not part of the future, anyways, if Riley doesn't get back to being that MVP candidate, these are all things I don't think are going to happen. I think Olsen's going to be a 40 home run hitter. I think Riley's going to be an MVP. The big one to me is if Acuna comes back and he's the 2022 version of Acuna, and that's the Acuna we're going to get going forward, which is not terrible, by the way. It's still a 115 WRC plus player. It's still a well above average player, but it's not the MVP. And I don't even know that he has to be MVP type of level, but give me 280, 30 home runs, 20 stolen bases. I mean, that is still a really good player, and we just don't know. That is the only thing that would somewhat concern me with the direction of this team, but I still believe that there is talent around him that if he is not that version, and if he is more like the 2022 version, that this team could withstand that. But that is a big question mark that could somewhat derail or cap the limit of this team for the next 4 to 5 years. If Acuna can't get back to being that perennial all-star MVP type of player, that would be pretty big. I think the other part of that is if some of these young pitchers don't start to develop, if you don't at least get one of AJ Smith-Shawver or Hurston Waldrop to take a step forward this year to be a big part of this rotation going forward, that would concern me a little bit. I know we talked about it on yesterday's episode, how it looks on paper 4 years from now that this rotation could be really good with a Strider, a Schwellenbach, an AJ Smith-Shawver, a Waldrop, a Caminiti, a J.R. Ritchie, and Owen Murphy. There are a lot of very promising and talented pitchers in this organization. But if those guys don't start developing and becoming mainstays at the major league rotation, then I would be concerned. But it's not now. I can tell you that confidently. In no way, shape, or form am I concerned about the direction of this team. And like I said, I don't even know that there's anything that could really happen this year to make me too concerned. Other than just guys can't stay in healthy. Does Ozzie continue to get injured every other year? Does Michael Harris continue to have a blip in the radar every year with injury status? And those are the kind of things outside of your control. But as far as the talent of this team, I just can't see that giving me much of a concern long term. And I do think this team is going to spend, whether they are taking this year to kind of reset for the tax, if they were to do that, I would expect them to go back out and spend big in years to come. And I'm not saying they should or will do that this year. I'm just saying if they did, it wouldn't concern me for them not spending in the future. So I am not concerned about this team now. Again, I don't know there's anything that really could happen this year that would make me too concerned about the team long term. But let me know your thoughts. How are you concerned? What level of concern do you have? Because again, I think most of that is just built out of the fact that you're seeing what the Dodgers are doing, the Yankees are doing, the Mets are doing, and the Braves are doing nothing. And it's creating all this angst and anxiety with Braves fans. But the direction of this team still seems really strong. And because you're coming off a year that was tough to watch. So I get that from Braves fans, and I don't discredit anybody's feelings for that and feeling that way. I just don't agree. I'm not concerned about this team and the direction that they're heading. All right, a lot of more questions to get to, including my least favorite question that I've ever been asked. It will forever be the worst question that anybody has ever asked me. I'll answer that question here next. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely has happened to me. I don't know about you. I just always constantly have this feeling that I am paying for something that I'm not using. And when you can use Rocket Money to help you get rid of that feeling, because that's the feeling that I always have. And that's what Rocket Money is for. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with a Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's a rocketmoney.com/lockedon. One more time, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Thank you as always for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen, solely getting you caught up with everything happening around Major League Baseball. All right, this will be our last podcast of the week, and I say all offseason, unless the Braves do something. We will certainly jump back on for that, and then we'll be back on Monday with more Minors Monday. We're getting close to me revealing my top 10 going into next season. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the international free agent signings, as you're seeing some trickle in here as well. Hopefully we have a Roki Sasaki decision over the weekend that opens up the floodgates for the rest of the movement that needs to happen before spring training, in my opinion. So hopefully that does occur. All right, here's the question that I have teased twice now. Look, I love Ecuadorman, everyday listener on here, always giving great questions. I want to ban you for this question because you're going to make me pick between my two favorite Braves players probably of all time. But the question from Ecuadorman is, If you had to pick a defensive first player, would it be Andrew Jones or Andrelton Simmons? And who in your mind was better of the two defensively? If you listen to this podcast, I am a defensive first person. I love the defensive side of the game. And I got an Ozzie Smith card behind me over here. I've got Andrelton Simmons card behind me over here. I love the shortstop position. I love defense. It's what I loved about the game. It's why I fell in love with the game, watching guys like an Ozzie Smith growing up and a Royce Clayton behind him, and then growing up with a Furcal and Andrelton Simmons, Omar Vizquel. I love defensive players, and you can probably tell which direction I'm going, and it pains me to do this. I think Andrelton Simmons was a better defensive player than Andrew Jones. And I'm sure there are many people that are exploding from me saying that. But I just think what he does at an infield position, and this is why this question pains me. I am not taking anything away from Andrew Jones, who I have said on many occasions needs to be in the Hall of Fame because he is one of the best, if not the best defensive center fielder this game's ever seen. I just think playing the shortstop position is harder than playing the outfield position. And I think some of the things Andrelton Simmons did are just bonkers. It's stuff. Again, I love Ozzie Smith. He's one of the reasons I fell in love with the game watching him play. He's done things I don't think we've seen Ozzie Smith do. What Simba did defensively, I mean, I can watch his highlights all day long. It is just absurd, the level of range that he had, but the level of range with that arm strength. That's what separates him in my mind from anybody else I've ever seen play the position defensively. Now, Simba's not going to get the recognition because he didn't play that long. He wasn't the offensive power of even somebody like an Andrew Jones. But in my mind, I have never seen anybody who was better defensively than Andrelton Simmons. In my mind, he is the best defensive player I've ever seen play, period. Go back and watch his highlights if you don't agree. That might be a hot take. But Andrelton Simmons, if I'm comparing him and Andrew Jones, for one, the positions are different, and I think infield position is just harder to play in general. But I think Andrelton Simmons is not just a better defensive player than Andrew Jones. I think he's one of the best defensive players I've ever seen. And I think, honestly, the game's seen. So somebody clip that. I'll probably get roasted for it, but Andrelton Simmons is probably my favorite player of all time, so I'm certainly going to back him up there. Ecuadorman, you are now banned. No more questions from you. E. Goldie, where do you think Michael Harris will hit in the lineup this year? Snit seems to love Ozzie in the 2-hole, but don't think Mike is a better option there. Here's the thing. Neither one of them are great options in the 2-hole, at least for what I want in the 2-hole. I want somebody that can work account, get on base, take their walks. Neither one of those guys do that. Neither one of them are taking a walk. Neither one of them are working in at bat. And that's tough if you have a guy like Ronald at the top of your lineup who, you want to get on base, you want to steal, and the guy behind him is up there swinging first, second, third pitch and not giving him time to steal that bag. So, I mean, in all honesty, neither one of them are the better 2-hole options. I think they're put there because of their speed, and you want more speed at the top. But I don't think either one is an ideal 2-hole hitter. I agree with you. I think he's going to put Ozzie there just because you get the switch hitter. So, you get the matchup, no matter what side. But I don't think either one, at least in terms of what I want in a number 2 hitter, I don't think either guy is the ideal spot for that. They've tried Matt Olson in that 2-hole before as well. And I think that's why, because, you want somebody there that's on base guy, but I'm fine with Matt Olson in the 4 or 5 spot, getting those 2-3 run home runs with those guys on base rather than having him there with the high on base percentage. But I think it'll be Ozzie who's in that 2-hole. Caden Hurd, what would a trade package look like for Freddie Peralta? I know they won't trade him, but I'd like to dream. I mean, look, any trade for a top player like that, and Freddie Peralta, even though I'm somewhat fading him, I think he's kind of on the downspin spiral a little bit. He is still really affordable. You're going to have to give up an A.J. Smith-Shawver, Hurston Waldrop, Jake Baldwin. A trade for a Garrett Crochet, like we talked about, a trade for a Kyle Tucker, a trade for somebody like a Freddie Peralta, somebody who has, done it a long time and they're affordable. You're going to have to give up your top prospect to get them. You're not getting a deal like that done without giving up one of those 3 guys that I just mentioned. Dustin Mounts, I think Ian Anderson and A.J. Smith-Shawver have one option left or out of options. How do you think this affects the bullpen and starting rotation opening day, and what are the options left on the remaining starters at the back end of the rotation and bullpen arms. So I'm not going to talk about everybody. I'll focus on Ian Anderson and AJ Smith-Shawver that you talked about. Ian Anderson is out of options. Alex Anthopoulos mentioned that in his interview that we covered a couple of weeks ago, and mentioned that because he is out of options, the guy, maybe he doesn't get a spot in the rotation out of spring training, that perhaps you put him in a bullpen role. And I think that, would make some sense. But Ian Anderson is out of options. Either he has to be on the opening day roster, or you risk losing him through waivers. So he is out of options. Ian Anderson certainly is. AJ Smith-Shawver has one option left, which is kind of crazy for as young as he is, but that's the downfall of bringing him up so early. So he does only have one option left. So you can use that this year, but next year he would be out of options in the same boat as an Ian Anderson. I think to kind of answer your question a little bit, Ian Anderson and Grant Holmes are both out of options. Those are two pitchers that I know are out of options. Those are the two guys that Alex talked about as being out of option guys, that if they don't win the rotation spot, they could go to the bullpen. AAWX says, with it seeming more and more likely Sasaki is signing with the Dodgers, that doesn't leave any room for Kershaw. Is it a viable option to try to sign him? I know he has had his injury history, but so did Sale, and look what happened. I'd put Kershaw in that same boat that I do, Lance Lynn, Max Scherzer, Jose Quintana. As a veteran, get him on a one-year deal, just see what they can give you. Where I would probably rank him in that, I'd honestly, at this point, I'd probably go Lynn, Quintana, Scherzer, and then maybe Kershaw. I put Kershaw and Scherzer both have the higher upside of those picks, no doubt. But I just don't know that I trust them to give me the innings. And what I am really looking for more than anything is somebody that's going to give me innings. I think Kershaw either goes back to the Dodgers or he retires. So I don't think the Braves are really an option. But I put him in that same boat as those other veteran starters. Kathy G, with hires coming on, which current players are you most excited to see what he can do to fix them? Also, could that be a factor in A's delaying filling those spots? See what happens and upgrade later in spring training. Whoever hires can't fix. I don't think they would wait to see what happens in spring training with the new hitting coach before making a move. So I don't think that's part of it. I think Jared Kelenic is the obvious one to see what he can do with him. I mean, if you can get Jared Kelenic going, getting some better swing decisions, pitch recognition, the batted ball data is all there for him. It's just too much chase, too much swing and miss. If you can get him to, as we talked about, I think on the podcast last week, we did a whole breakdown on what has really plagued Jared Kelenic. If he can fix those things, then all of a sudden you have an everyday outfielder for the foreseeable future at a pretty good cost. So I think he's the one that everybody's most excited about. Look, all the other Braves hitters, I think they're going to be fine, with the exception of not really knowing what Acuna's going to look like when he comes back. But Riley looked more like himself in the second half of the year before he got hurt. Matt Olson wasn't great, but he still was, a home run and an RBI or two away from a 3,000 season. I think he's going to be fine. Marcell Ozuna has been fine for 2 years. I don't know that you can fix Orlando Arcia, but if you could get him back to league average, give the man an award. So I just don't know how many players you're really looking at for him to fix outside of Jared Kelenic. I think it's just maybe what I'm really looking for is just a change in approach, maybe with some of these hitters, more two-strike awareness, more of a game plan, which seemed to go away this past year. But Jared Kelenic's the obvious answer. I mean, he is the biggest project on this team right now. What can you do with him? Can you make him an everyday player? Can you make him at least a viable strong side platoon player, which I think at best is what he is, and that's even a little bit questionable. So Jared Kelenic's the obvious answer there. Drew said, this late in the offseason, which of these three do you think is most likely? Trade, free agent signing, nothing else until the season starts. I'll say free agent signing is the most likely, just because, it's you're not having to depend as much. It's just a player that's agreeing to take your team-friendly deal, which is essentially what AA and Braves fans are waiting for. Which player is going to say, okay, I really want to play for the Braves. I'll play for you for whatever you want me to. I'm being somewhat hyperbolic there, but I do think a free agent signing is the most likely to happen. And I do think that is what will happen. Dan Antlers says, wouldn't Flaherty, won't cost a draft pick, or another guy on an expiring contract make more sense in this rotation with guys like AJ Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrop eventually needing a chance? barring an injury, the first 4 spots are locked down for the next 2 years. I'm assuming in this scenario, you're thinking that Jack Flaherty is going to take a 1-year deal or a shorter term deal, as has been rumored that he might be willing to do that. Look, if you can get a good pitcher and lock them up for 3 to 4 years, you let the rest of the thing, you let everything else play out. We're hoping that AJ Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrop are going to eventually become really good starting pitchers at the big league level. We don't know that. We haven't seen enough at the major league level to really say one way or the other. So you get a chance to get a really good, proven major league pitcher, and we can debate on whether you think Jack Flaherty is that or not, or somebody else. You go out and make that move regardless of what you think is coming and regardless of who you think that might block. If we've learned anything over the last several years, is pitchers are very finicky, and your rotation can look great one day and it can look awful the next. Just a few injuries here or there, guys regressing, pitchers can change really quickly. So I wouldn't make a move and say, we got to get somebody on a short-term deal because we got pitchers coming up that need chances. I would not do that. I would go out and get the best move that you think you can get done regardless of the length, and don't worry about who it's blocking. 10-Day IL says, do you think the Braves give Nacho a real shot to win the shortstop job, or will it be a replay of the Grissom situation? Are there any minor league outfielders in the system that could impact the major league club this year? Answer your first question. I hope they come into spring training and make it a competition. I've said this multiple times this offseason. If there are no other moves made, I hope they go into spring training saying, Arcia, you have to win this job. Nacho obviously seems to be the one to give him the most competition. I think if they did that, it would be a Vaughn Grissom situation where, yeah, you may get a competition, but at the end of the day, they're going to go with the proven guy who they know is going to give them solid defense. And so I think it would be another Vaughn Grissom situation where he could play lights out in spring training as Vaughn Grissom did, and they'd still go with Orlando Arcia. But I hope they at least come into spring training and tell Arcia, you got to earn this job again and make it a real battle and a competition. Minor league outfielders in the system that could impact the major league club this year, none come to mind except for maybe a Jesse Franklin, left-handed power bat. I think, he's obviously been injured. He missed most of last year, I believe it was, coming back from Tommy John surgery. So he's the only bat that comes to mind that might be able to impact the big league level next year, but I'm not really confident in that. All right, got several more questions still to get to on today's episode. Wide range of questions, looking at some free agents and trades that could be out there, including making me pick what move should the Braves make, kind of similar to last week's podcast. If you could only make one move, which would it be? I'll answer some of those questions here next. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keep every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. And you go out there now also and check out some of their odds for the 2025 season for Major League Baseball awards. Odds that they have out there. You can see all that over at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure to visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. All right, got a few more questions to get into, and then we will wrap up the Mailbag podcast today. As always, thank you so much for submitting these questions. Always bring some great questions all off season long, despite nothing really happening. And I really do appreciate it. It makes this Friday podcast so much more fun and enjoyable. Caden Hurd, I believe it's almost guaranteed that the Braves are resetting the tax. So with that, if you could only make one of these moves and stay under, what would you do? Sign Anthony Santander for 3 years, no opt-outs or anything like that. Sign Jack Flaherty for 3 years, but with an opt-out. Both, but if I could only pick one, I have to go Jack Flaherty because I've said multiple times, I still think the pitching is the bigger need for this team. I have to believe that the offense is going to come back, be healthier than it was last season, and be more productive than it was last season. My bigger concern is getting the pitching to cover the regular season. And it'd be nice if you got an arm that also could help you potentially in the postseason. And Jack Flaherty could be that guy. So for me, if I only can do one of those moves, I'm going to go Jack Flaherty. While I like both of them, would love to do both of them because Santander could give you somebody that you can live with in the outfield this year, and then they take over the DH spot next year with Marcell Ozuna gone. So I think Santander makes sense in that regard. But of just those two, I think Flaherty is the bigger need because I think pitching is the bigger need. Hayden Harris, taking Alex at his word that they have the money to spend, does slower, softer market actually benefit the Braves? I don't know that that's the case. I don't know that this market is done. I think it's on hold because of Sasaki a little bit. I think there are going to be deals to have. I mean, as it's been pretty proven now that players who sign late in the offseason, it doesn't really go well for them. So there has to be some urgency from some of these players to get deals done. And maybe that does benefit the Braves. And there's always guys at the end of the offseason who overplayed their hand a little bit and they have to take a lesser deal than they thought maybe at the beginning of the offseason. And you could certainly benefit in that way. But I just don't know how much it really benefits the Braves. I think it's kind of more of the norm. Seethan says, Jake, how are you doing this fine day? Well, thank you so much for asking me that. And I don't know anybody really asked me that. I'm doing okay. It's a Friday. We got a lot of sickness going around in the house. Hopefully we're getting over that, but thank you so much. Hope you're having a blessed day. Caleb Hudgens says, you can only choose one. Braves sign Tanner Scott, 4 years, $60 million, and acquire Taylor Ward, or Braves acquire Pablo Lopez and sign Ha-Seong Kim to 3 year, $42 million. Drake Baldwin is not included in any trade, period. I don't think you certainly would need Baldwin in a trade for Taylor Ward. You probably would in a move for Lopez, unless you can get away with that, giving up either Waldrop or AJ Smith-Shawver, which I would be okay with because I like Pablo Lopez. I think of those two moves, I think I'm going Pablo Lopez and Ha-Seong Kim. Although I wouldn't do Ha-Seong Kim 3 years, $42 million. I don't think, not really knowing what his injury status is, but kind of like with the Jack Flaherty, Santander situation, give me the starting pitcher, the top of the rotation pitcher who can help you win in the postseason. I'm almost always going to prefer that over anything else. So I think I'd go Lopez and Kim, even if Kim's going to miss the first 2 months of the season. He's obviously an upgrade at shortstop, what he can do there. So I like that move better. Jay Smith, if the dream pin of Scott doesn't work out, who would be your ideal free agent pin arm? Along with that theme, what realistic free agent pitcher and outfielder left would be your ideal fit? We talked really about Jack Flaherty. I think is the ideal starting pitcher that's left out there for me. Outfielders, I'm starting to come around a little bit on Jerickson Profar, depending on the cost. I think he would be the ideal fit, somebody that can play second base as well if Ozzie does get injured again. Relievers, look, go out and just sign a David Robertson, and I'd be happy for a reliever. I mean, a reliever is something you can fix during the season. Like if you had the rest of the offseason, you signed Jack Flaherty, you signed Jerickson Profar, and you signed David Robertson, I would love that offseason. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that's probably too much to ask for, but those would kind of be some of my targets. And again, relievers, I think there's probably a lot out there. Robertson's just the first one that comes to mind for me. PJ's Braves, assuming he is healthy, what would a good year for Shawn Murphy look like from your perspective? And what do you think is the ideal spot for him in the lineup? A good year for Murphy would be 2023, just probably more consistency throughout. He was hot in the beginning, cold at the end. I just need to see more consistency throughout for him. But, 260, 265 average, maybe that's a little too high. 18 to 20 home runs. I think that's realistic with his power and being one of the best defensive catchers in the game. I think that is a good year for Shawn Murphy. And I think it's a year that we honestly should expect. I mean, that's kind of what we were sold on. That's kind of what we were teased with in 2023. I think that's who Shawn Murphy needs to be. I think that's who Shawn Murphy can be. Again, a 250, 260 hitter, between 15, 20 home runs, something like that, batting 5th, 6th in the lineup. I think is probably where he fits best. But that's kind of what I expect from Shawn Murphy and who I think he can be. Taylor Greenhut, in your opinion, do you believe Atlanta will attempt to extend Acuna before his contract expires and win, or will this be another Freeman Dansby Fried 4 years, severely underpaid compared to peers, but 2 ACL injuries already? Have to believe he wants to get paid more soon. Enjoy the next 4 years of Ronald Acuna Jr. Maybe the Braves make it happen. Alex has, stated he wants to make it happen. Acuna said he wants to be here, but that's what Freddie said. That's what Dansby said. That's what Fried said. And look, it is a risk. A guy that has had major ACL injuries, on both knees, is probably going to have to be a DH in the second half of his career. I mean, that's a lot of risk there. So I feel like, he certainly doesn't owe the Braves anything, and he's got to see all these other players getting these mega deals. If he goes out and has another MVP type of season and proves to be that player again, he's going to get paid big money when he gets to free agency. Even, going into his 30s, he's going to get paid big money. And we know if you hit free agency, the Braves aren't going to bring you back. Atlanta Sports Central is the Dodgers' potential rotation of Glasnow, Snell, Yamamoto, Sasaki, Ohtani, Kershaw, the best rotation of all time on paper. I don't know. I mean, I don't have the list of best rotations in baseball in front of me right now, but I mean, certainly those are all guys who are ace level type of pitchers. I mean, Glasnow, he's an ace level type of pitcher. Blake Snell, he's won 2 Cy Young awards. Yamamoto, we didn't really get to see much of him last year, but a guy that's at least a 1 or a 2. We've seen Ohtani, what he can be, being an ace level type of starter. I think Kershaw, I don't know what you would expect from him. I wouldn't really include him in this group. And we don't know what to expect of Sasaki. Now, so all of these guys have ace level type of potential. Number 1, number 2 type starter, except for maybe Kershaw at this point. But Glasnow can't pitch more than 130 innings. Blake Snell seems to always have a hiccup and doesn't pitch the whole year. We haven't seen Yamamoto do that. Sasaki hasn't done that. Even in the Japanese league, he wasn't, throwing a ton of innings. Ohtani's coming off major surgery. Look, that rotation looks great on paper, as you said, but there are still huge question marks about every single one of those guys and whether or not they can hold up. If they get to the postseason and 3 or 4 of those guys are healthy, they're going to be a problem, and it's going to be the best rotation in the postseason. But there's some major concern and injury risk with all of those guys in that rotation. All right, that is all the all the time that we have for questions today, and that is all the questions that we have at this point. Do have a little bit of news to report. So some of you talking about it in the chat section. AJ Minter and the Mets have agreed to a 2-year, $22 million deal, includes an opt-out after 2025. So AJ Minter going to the rival in the New York Mets. So a bit of surprise there. Wish him all the best. Hate that he's going to the Mets. I told you I'm a little worried about AJ Minter. He kind of had some ups and downs the last 2 seasons. That cutter is not as effective as it has been, and that hip injury makes me a little bit nervous. So I'm not too upset about not getting him back. That price isn't terrible, $11 million a year, but that's more than you're paying Pierce Johnson. It's more than you're paying Joe Jimenez, and I think he's probably in that same range. It's just he's a lefty, so he's going to get bumped up a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, that stinks obviously to see him go to a division rival. I think that cost is okay. But I'm also not too upset about not getting him, just because I'm a little worried about the injuries and just the lack of effectiveness, probably partially due to those injuries, or a lot due to those injuries the last couple of years. But yeah, hate to see that he's going to the Mets, certainly, because you just know he's going to dominate the Braves now next time they see him. But a little bit of news here to end the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Anthony Hood here at the end, Storm Chaser, Joe, Jeff Berry as well, Tony Ecuadorman in here. I thought I'd banned you. Get out of here. Thank you all for joining the podcast today. Jonathan Schnapp as well. Appreciate you all joining me live on today's episode of Locked On Braves. Soul Still Burns, Doug Belly in here. Thank you so much for all your support here at Locked On Braves. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. If you're new, hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. Thanks for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen. And make sure you follow us on social media at shortstopball, at LockedOn_Braves. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.